What's up, heathens? How y'all doing? I'm doing pretty good. Tonight we're going to be looking at some Mark Sargent shit. He, Celebrate Truth posted up a talk that he did kind of recently. And it was at like a flat earth thing, I think in Canada. I don't know. Flat earthers have conferences now, so it's kind of odd.
1. Long distance photography. Number 2. Vacuum versus gravity. Number 3. Eclipse Shadow. Number 4. Moon temperature. Last but not least, the Van Allen belts.
But tonight we're going to be looking at his 5 things that he asked a Georgetown physicist, supposedly, and they couldn't answer him. So we're going to attempt to answer his questions tonight, answer his criticisms, and I have a lovely cup of a shot here, and I'm gonna take a shot every time he says something dumb as fuck. Today we have Mark Sargent. He gave a kind of a talk at a Flat Earth conference, and just like in pure Mark Sargent fashion, he wasn't there to appease anybody but himself, and he was just spitting the same rhetoric that he always does. But he does lead off the entire first part by laying out his case against the globe model, or at least the things that convinced him that the world was flat. So we're going to be going through these 5 things. I have the information linked in the description below. If you will, please share out this particular live stream so that other people can bask in the ignorance that is Mark Sargent. Mark Sargent, if you happen to see this, I sincerely doubt the very first few sentences of your speech here, and also all of your arguments are bullshit. That's why I have Jesus come. I'm going to take a shot at Jesus come for every dumbass comment you make.
Some months ago, a German television team contacted me because they had heard about my science challenge and had found a physicist at Georgetown University I could debate.
So I'm calling bullshit on your first statement here, okay? I don't think that any physicist at Georgetown University actually wanted to have a discussion with you. Now, that's not to say that somebody didn't contact you claiming to be a German TV show or something and wanted to do this with you. They very well could have. But I contacted Georgetown University and nobody knew what you were fucking talking about. The people that I did email, they haven't gotten back to me yet, but I know that they were in the office today, so I don't think that a real physicist would talk to you. Okay, I really don't think that that was a situation, or it was not nobody on staff there or in the faculty. I disagree highly with this first part. Right now it's just anecdotal, and more than likely he's bullshitting at this point. I have no reason to believe any kind of anecdotal story that comes out of Mark's mouth.
They also wanted to make it as easy on the scientist as possible, so their idea was simple. They would record me on video, reading 5 quick science-based questions, and then send that recording over to Georgetown, and he would respond in kind. This is what I read on camera.
Prepare your anus.
1. Long-distance photography. The mainstream science formula for the curvature of the Earth.
Drink! So, yes, this is the common, oh, look, I've got a P9000, and I'm gonna zoom into the horizon, and we can see ships coming at us.
Earth is 8 inches per mile squared. An easy comparison would be the falling rate of 32 feet per second. So 8 inches per mile per mile. 2 miles is 2 times 2 equals 4 times 8 inches, or 32. 3 miles is 3 times 3 equals 9 times 8, or 72, and so on.
Yes, Mark, we know how to do basic math. We also know the 8 inches per mile thing, which admittedly, it's not exactly correct. For long distances like he's wanting to use here, it's definitely not applicable. It gives you somewhere in the ballpark of what it should be, but also you're not taking into consideration refraction that allows you to see past the curve.
At 50 miles, the curvature is 50 times 50 times 8, coming in at over 1,600 feet of curvature. With HD cameras, we can pull boats back into frame that are well beyond visual range.
Because of refraction.
Not only.
Also, just because it goes out of your own personal eyesight doesn't mean that it's like disappeared over the curve. Obviously, we don't have Hawkeye fucking vision. We don't have vision that can just see until we can't see past the curve, all right?
The new technology clearly show that it's not a mirage, same objects can be viewed in infrared and can be targeted ship to ship by beam radar. Can science explain this? They had no answer.
I call bullshit on them not having an answer because I'm fairly certain that they would have an answer. Before you get on to your next point, light acts as both a particle and a wave. The radar signals, those act as waves, and they operate in the same manner. So the fact that the radars can hit those objects over the curve too makes sense because of how light refracts. The radar signals, those would also refract off of the atmosphere. It would also explain why the infrared could see it. This really isn't a problem. Any physicist would be able to actually describe this to you and explain it to you. My guess is that if you were actually in contact with a physicist, he would probably give you an answer that you didn't like, and so therefore you say, he didn't answer my question. So you're disingenuous on multiple things here, and it's really not all that surprising.
Vacuum versus gravity.
Vacuum versus gravity. Take another shot. Mine are small shots right now because I got to pace this shit out over all of his bullshit.
Force of a vacuum is measured in units of torr, T-O-R-R. Even a low-level vacuum can overcome gravity here on the surface. In building molecule-free chambers for the manufacturing of electronics, a series of massive pumps are needed to create a 99% vacuum. That's -9 torr. And for the remaining 1%, horsepower isn't enough. It can only be achieved by a chemical leaching process. That being said, how is the -10 torr vacuum force of space not ripping off the atmosphere of this world?
For one thing, as far as creating a vacuum here on Earth, what you're doing is you're creating a pocket of vacuum. You're still creating a vacuum in a fluid, because all atmosphere is a fluid. It's controlled, fluid dynamics can help explain to you like how it moves, how we're moving through it, how the internal pressure of our bodies matches the external pressure, and that's how we can actually move under one atmosphere of pressure at sea level. You could look up all of those things, but the pure and simple fact is that gravity does exist. The Earth is so large that it holds an atmosphere. That's the reason why we can live here. And because it can hold an atmosphere, the atmosphere stays on it for a certain amount of ways up, and then after that point, the air gets thinner. There's an atmospheric gradient as you get higher up in the air. If we were an enclosed dome like this dipshit thinks, then we would expect a non-gradient, like it would be equal in every single layer of the atmosphere, but we don't see that. There's a very top layer that's very thin, and yes, solar winds and all of that can seep off some of the atmosphere, but we are also protected by the magnetic field of the Earth. Whereas, like for instance, the moon isn't protected by a significant magnetic field. That's why the moon doesn't have an atmosphere, because it doesn't have enough gravity to actually hold an atmosphere, but also the sun, the solar winds and all that other kind of shit out there in space helped exacerbate like the removal of any kind of atmosphere that would have existed on the moon. So those are those two different things. The question shouldn't be how does an atmosphere exist next to a vacuum. It should be what causes the atmosphere to remain on the Earth. It's all because of gravity. And I know that he probably thinks that this is some kind of magical fucking force that just exists. I think that as long as we understand the effect of gravity on reality, we can make good observations. We can make good predictions.
What is gravity?
What is gravity? I have a what is gravity link below. Anything with mass has gravity. Right now, my face is attracted to this fucking camera. But the force of the Earth's gravity far exceeds the force of gravity between my face and this fucking camera.
And remember that there are gases that already defy it, like helium, hydrogen, and fluorocarbons.
I disagree with that. They don't defy gravity. They're still subject to gravity. It's not like those particular things just fucking float off of the Earth naturally or anything. They exist up there in the atmosphere. There's different layers to the atmosphere at which different gases can exist. Buoyancy can explain why lighter elements float to the top, but the fact that it's floating up is indicative of gravity at work. Buoyancy requires gravity, Mark.
Isn't it more logical to suggest the atmosphere is being contained in an enclosed, pressurized system?
No, it doesn't. Because if you look at any enclosed pressurized system, let's say you got a box where you increase the pressure is going to be equal in every single direction, right? You're going to have the pressure, it's going to be equalized, right? Your box is going to be one particular pressure while the outside's another pressure. Just take tires, for example. It's not like there's a gradient of pressure in a tire from bottom to top. We would expect that on a spherical Earth where gravity holds an atmosphere onto the Earth. We would expect a gradient. What would we expect on a dome-covered Earth that's pressurized? We would expect the gases to have the same pressure throughout the entire system. And we don't see that at all. Red's Rhetoric, who I'm sure is still watching right now, he has videos of rockets going up and you can see the exhaust gases expanding as it gets higher and higher in the air. Just go and watch his videos. Those are proof positive that there's a gradient. Also, anybody that climbs mountains could tell you this shit.
They had no answer.
They would have had an answer. Physicists can answer these things. So that's why I'm calling bullshit on your shit.
Number 3, Eclipse Shadow. Mainstream science tells us that the moon is over 2,000 miles wide, and yet during the 2017 American eclipse, no offense, the moon's shadow was only 70 miles wide.
First of all, I love how he American eclipse, because fuck you, Canada. I love you, by the way. So yeah, it was an American eclipse, I guess.
A reduction of over 97%. This is what the equivalent of having a 6-foot man walking in front of a wall where his shadow is smaller than an action figure at only 2 inches.
Okay, so if you look at the description, I have some links in there that explain the shadow of the moon whenever there's a solar eclipse. Basically, the sun is so big and so far away that when the light hits the moon, there is a sort of focused point that's so big, but then the shadow expands because that's how the light's hitting it. So there's a big blurry thing, and then there's a more focused thing that he's talking about here. And he doesn't understand the whole idea of the two different situations there, because he thinks that the sun is local and small, whereas reality is completely fucking different.
Where do we see this in our everyday lives? We've seen a shadow's actual size and some much larger. Where can we see small shadows? The Flat Earth community says that the moon is less than 50 miles wide, much closer and the same size as the sun. Isn't this explanation also possible?
No, it isn't, because it actually asks more questions than it answers, because then you got to explain what the sun is made out of, what causes it to rotate around in the atmosphere. Why doesn't our atmosphere just set itself on fire because the sun is there? You would have to explain why we have so much solar power that is projected onto a square mile of the Earth, and that would be indicative of whatever the fuck your particular sun's made out of. And then, the questions could go on and on about this shit. How does the whole moon and sun thing work? Is the moon just so far down? Is it so far down beneath the sun and it goes under it and it just rotates under it? What's pushing the moon along? How does the gravity of both of the... Well, you guys don't fucking believe in gravity. I don't even know why the fuck I'm bringing that up. Honey, why am I bringing up gravity with this motherfucker?
Science has yet to address this relatively new discovery that the moon generates a cold light.
The moon does not present a cold light. There is no cold light coming off of the moon. The moon reflects light from the sun.
We all know that in the daytime it is 90 degrees in the sunlight, 80 degrees in the shade, depending on conditions. I know I'm not going to do the Celsius conversion up here, sorry.
Motherfucker, what you do is you divide, or you, let's see, what, oh fuck.
I have you now.
You gotta subtract 32 from your Fahrenheit and then divide by 1.8, motherfucker.